entire globe involving hundreds of different cultures explaining the same phenomenon by different names.
The nature of the footprints, namely their remarkable consistency, their biomechanical appropriateness, those aspects that are extremely compelling.
Hey everyone, how you doing?
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bigfoot Influencers podcast. I'm Dina.
And I'm Tim. We're thrilled to be here, and we're thrilled that you're joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's new?
A lot of things are new.
What's new?
Yeah. I mean, this is the season where all the conferences are getting scheduled.
Mm-hmm. Weather's getting warmer.
Yeah, leaves are turning, and little buds on the trees are coming out. But yeah, it's fun because there's just a ton of conferences. We're going to get to some. Unfortunately, Lauren Coleman had to push back his International Cryptozoology conference in Maine. I was going to be there to talk about the book, but hopefully we get there next year because he's got some exciting things. Because he's
opening a new museum.
Yeah, well, he had the museum open, but he found that building that they agreed to lease, I guess, or purchase. I'm not sure if he's buying it or leasing it, but it's a really old historic building, I think from the 50s. So that's going to be super exciting. So I think that's probably why he had to push it back, which would be cool because maybe he's going to move it up to Bangor because this one the normal one or past one was in Portland,
right?
Or Portland, Oregon, Portland, Maine. But he's got the second museum in Bangor, if I'm pronouncing that right. And that's where the new building's going to be. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I think it's Bangor.
Bangor.
I don't know. You know who would probably know is our next guest. Do you think he would know?
He would.
He probably would.
Likely, yeah, him or John Wilk from Sasquatch
Exactly.
Because he's close enough up there. He's probably know who it is.
Exactly.
So yeah, we're super thrilled.
Yep, we are
what's
super
new
thrilled.
with you for the audience to know? You have your hair straight,
Straighten the hair today because every now and then I like to just make it straight. But I know Tim prefers it curly.
Oh, I love it both ways.
And that's why I wear curly all the time because he's my man and I got to make him happy. But sometimes it's nice to be straight hair girl.
Oh, you're beautiful no matter what. So I don't care.
But anyway, hey, on to our guest. We're super excited tonight to have Todd Prescott. Woo, he's so cool.
Oh my gosh, Todd. Yeah, yep. Todd's. I mean, he's a professional journalist. He's a musician. He's been, I think, 30 years. He's been studying and investigating the subject. We're going to get into the early researchers that he spent time with and his time out in the field. And then he created in 2015. He created the Sasquatch Archives, which, for the audience, and we're going to talk about later, who've not been on there, we'll show you how to get onto it from YouTube. It is definitely one of those things that is needed to document and archive the history of the subject. So, but Absolutely. He's got so much more to him. So I'm just happy to have him on. And he was part of the book. He was, well, let me bring him in. We'll talk while he's on.
We'll talk while he's on here. Hey, Todd.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome to the party.
So we were just saying, I guess you could probably hear us, but I just want to thank you again for being part of the book. Not only part of the book, you shared some of your photos with me that I was able to use in the book. So that was really, really, really cool. I'm probably going to hit you up once I get into the next volume too. So
no problem.
I've got something I'm not going to say now that I want you to do, but I haven't asked you yet. So
anytime. No, it's always a pleasure to share information, and that's what life is all about. And especially with Bigfoot research, we need a lot more of that.
Don't you just love Todd's Canadian accent? It's so cute because you're from Canada, and you currently also live in Canada. Where are you in Canada?
I'm in Toronto, Ontario.
Okay, cool. That's super cool. So do you know the proper pronunciation of Bangor, Maine?
I have no idea.
Okay. Just because it's up north doesn't mean, right?
I'm Canadian, remember?
Exactly. I know. But we thought because you're like a man of the world that you would know. So, but that's okay. I'm sure somebody will mention it in the comments.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So
let's jump into a little personal stuff real quick with you, Todd. So you're a musician. So how long have you been a musician? And also, like, a little other question to jump in there is, can you share how traveling for music allowed you to get in the woods and look for Sasquatch?
So yeah, absolutely. In high school, of course, like any kid, you find your calling, and music was my calling, specifically playing drums. Although I dabbled on guitar, bass, and piano, but drums was just, it was the noisemaker. And one of my friends was a drummer before I was, and he seemed to get all the attention, especially from the ladies. So I thought, okay, that's my in. And I started playing on my own, and one thing led to another. You start playing with some of your buddies and bands, and eventually I connected with a band that was traveling, a touring band, and so we traveled all throughout Ontario. And a lot of people don't know that the province of Ontario has a lot of history of sightings and encounters to do with Sasquatch and Bigfoot. A lot of people think of British Columbia as the hub of Sasquatch research, and in some respects it is in Canada. But Ontario does have quite a vast history going back to at least 1906. So at least documented history. And so I was just so thrilled and excited because I was already into Bigfoot, Sasquatch at that time. And to join a band and travel through the province meant that I could see some of those places that I had read about for many years. And that's exactly what I did. Traveling through the province, playing so many places, and especially up north, because it seems that people love their music and entertainment in the northern part of the province because there's nothing else to do. and that's where a lot of the Sasquatch sightings were happening. And so when the band was performing, I was with them, and I'd get up early in the morning and go out and just look around the area and follow up on reports. So it was a dream come true for me. It was a great fusion of two interests, music and research. And so I spent a lot of time in the field.
And you've been doing it for what, about 30 years, I assume, right?
Well, I've been at it probably more than that. I don't even want to think about how long I've been doing it. I just want to keep moving. I just want to keep moving.
So yeah, go ahead.
Once you put a number on it, then you start to think, geez, I'm getting old.
Yeah. Right? I think it's funny when you're like at the grocery store and like you run into like a high school friend and you're like, oh my God, they're like an old person. Then you're like, wait a second, I graduated with them. I guess I'm old too.
Well, it's funny you say that because just on Saturday I was playing a wedding and like performing at a wedding, and the sound guy there, I didn't know he was going to be there. He comes up to me and says, "Hey, Todd." And I looked at him. I did not recognize the guy because he's totally lost weight. He's aged and he has a beard, and said, "Oh, how many years has it been?" And he said, 32 years since I'd seen him last.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
This is the time where we're going to start changing a little bit, I think. Yeah.
It's kind of like the story when we took my mom to her where she grew up, and we ran into an old friend, and we figured out that they hadn't seen each other in 72 years or something like that. Is wild,
Holy.
Yeah.
The last time they saw each other, they were like 15 or something crazy like that.
It's like 70 years ago. It was crazy.
It was crazy.
So I wanted you to share a story, a compelling story about when you almost got attacked by a mother bear in the woods. I was hoping you could share that.
Yeah. So I was in British Columbia at the time. I had lived there in 1995 and 1896 because I joined a band that was out there. And for those who don't know the geography, British Columbia is on the west coast of Canada, and it's a good 5-hour flight from Ontario. So there's quite a distance between the two provinces. So I had joined this band, and that was another dream come true because I'm in British Columbia, traveling around that province and getting to follow up on reports and see, just see the mountains and the wilderness and all that. So I was there 95, 96. Things didn't work out with the band because, long story, but there was a marriage in the band between the singer and the guitar player, and that's never a good idea. They ended up splitting up, so the band fell apart. It dissolved, and I moved back to Ontario. But then I booked a vacation, so to speak, or rather a research outing for 1997 in a place called Bella Coola, which is central coastal British Columbia. So it's north of Vancouver, and it's quite remote in all senses. I had to charter a plane to fly in. There are people there, of course. It's what some people refer to as a native reservation, indigenous peoples, what the Americans would call an Indian reservation. But my plan was to go into the mountains, which was crossing a river and about a 9-mile hike back up into the mountains. And I went alone, and this is before cell phones. At least I didn't have a cell phone back then, or anything of that nature. So I just had to let the my parents know, my family know, and a few other people, including a local forest ranger, that I would be going into this area and expect me out at this time, and I'll make contact. Anyhow, I'm there by myself. It was the scariest 2 weeks of my life. You have no idea how scary things are until you're by yourself in a remote location, surrounded by bears, mountain lions, wolves, coyotes, you name it, and possibly Sasquatch. Yeah. So I'm at the ready. I'm hiking, like I'm making way. I'm trying to get to a certain point in 2 weeks while, keeping my ears and eyes open. So I'm on high alert, and you just don't realize how vulnerable you are until you're out there with the elements. Going for a Sunday hike through a park is nothing like going into the mountains by yourself and seeing huge piles of bear scat, seeing where they've been digging, where they've been eating, where they've been denning, and hearing the sounds at night. Anyways, I was on pins and needles the whole time. I've got my bear spray at the ready. I've got my bear whistle. I've got my hunting knife. And, we can't really carry weapons in Canada if it's not hunting season. And of course you need a hunting permit. So I'm not packing any firearms. Anyhow, I'm going through some tall grass, and I hear a sound that completely sounded like a baby bear in distress. So automatically,
how tall was the grass?
The grass was probably just about up to my chest.
Okay.
So I'm walking through that. So I can't see anything that's in the grass, but I hear something, and it sounds like a young bear squealing. And automatically I'm freaking out. And I kind of crouch down a little bit, and I've got my huge can of bear spray at the ready, and my heart is just pounding like this. And I keep hearing the sound, but nothing's happening. I'm waiting for Mama Bear to come flying through the tall grass from somewhere. And it seemed like forever, but nothing's happening. But the sound is still happening. And so I thought, okay, well, I don't think this is a bear, but I'm not sure. So I crouch down into the grass, and I see some movement maybe 20 feet away from me. And it's a grouse or a partridge, something of that nature. Okay. And it's trying to lead me from its nest. So it's a sound like, hey, I'm in distress. Come get me. Don't get towards my chicks or my eggs. But oh my God, the intensity of that moment, I thought I was going to die. My life was flashing before me. It really was.
Over the killer grouse.
So it wasn't a bear.
No.
That was
That's awesome.
It was a grouse or a partridge. I'm not sure which. It was a bear that almost killed me somehow.
But you brought up a good point that I think, again, we could do a whole show on this. If you're in the woods, even if you're not alone, you let the park ranger know when you arrived and when you expect to leave and where you're going. I think that's super important.
Yeah, that is very important. And that's pretty brave, Todd, to be going out there completely by yourself.
It was probably foolish in hindsight.
Okay.
When I look back, it was foolish, because even though I let people know the path I was taking, the path that I planned to take wasn't really there. I was using a map from 1955 or somewhere along that, somewhere in that ballpark figure. And there was supposed to be a bridge that I was supposed to cross, about 9 miles back. I was supposed to cross a bridge. That bridge had washed out many years back. I think in the 60s, there was a flood, and it just washed away. So I really couldn't get across the river by crossing a bridge. I ended up getting across the river, but it was treacherous because I had to cross the river, and it was very chancy of me. And then I got to the other side, and there was absolutely no path. There was supposed to be an old logging road because part of the area had been logged. And this was according to the maps and people I talked to. but things change very quickly out on the West Coast in the rainforest. It changes very quickly. Things grow in and up, and things move and shift. It was really quite foolish of me. I think I wouldn't do it again, not alone, or at least not with one of those spot devices or a satellite cell phone, because there was a time when I was out there where I ate what I thought were cleavers. They're a plant that grow in Ontario, and at the time I was studying herbs, so I wanted to sort of do research and also kind of live off the land. And so I didn't take a lot of food. I was planning on living off the land for those 2 weeks as much as I could, thinking that there'd be a lot of wild edibles at the very least. Because British Columbia, they're ahead of us seasonally by a bit, but not in the mountains. The mountains are still, the season is slow. And I didn't factor that in because in Ontario, we don't really have mountains like that. So when I got out there, I was surprised, thinking I could eat, dandelion, cleavers, possibly some early spring berries, because it was May. But there was not a lot. I ended up eating thistles. There were some thistles, which aren't very tasty and not fun to pick and eat. But I ate this thing called cleavers. At least I think it was cleavers. It looked like cleavers. And I ended up getting a fever. And I presume from the cleavers. It could have been some of the water I drank. I was boiling the water, but maybe I didn't boil it enough. But I think it was the cleavers. I think it poisoned me, and my body broke out into a fever. There I am, all by myself. Actually, it was 11. By the end of it, I was 11 miles back, and I thought I was going to die. And that same night, a thunderstorm, lightning storm struck. And funny enough, I'm in my tent thinking, okay, this is it. This is my time. And I hear lightning strike a tree. And if you know the coastal trees, they're huge. Those Douglas firs, 200 feet. And it sounded like it was right beside me when it struck that tree. In the morning, I realized it was quite far away. But imagine hearing a tree falling, because it actually fell. And it came crashing down. And I thought, okay, I guess the fever, if the fever doesn't do it, or I should say the baby bear and the mama bear, which turned out to be the grouse. If that's not going to take me, well, then I guess this poisonous plant. If that's not going to take me, then I guess it's going to be the tree fall. And the fever, the fever broke that night or early in the morning. And if that weren't enough, I wake up to what I think is a bear approaching my tent. Something loud is coming towards my tent. And I had a little window flap, and I looked out the window flap, and it's a mama moose. And it's just sniffing the air, approaching me, thinking, what are you? What are you doing here? It didn't get that close, but close enough for me to go, what next? What is it now? So
at least it wasn't a bear. But I know that mooses can be more dangerous.
Yeah, the nice thing about moose is out of sight, out of mind. If they don't see you, they don't consider you a threat. Whereas a bear, they're a bit smarter, and hiding behind a tree doesn't work with a bear. But with a moose, so I've been told, I have never had to practice it, but all you have to do is just literally step behind a tree, and they think, okay, I guess that's gone, and they move along.
Okay. Good to know.
So remember that if a moose is charging you, just hide behind a tree, and it's gonna say, okay, I guess Tim and Dana are gone.
How do we hide? How do we hide from a mother grouse? What's your trick for that? Tall grass.
You face it head on with your bear spray.
Get your bear spray. Poor thing will be like, what are you doing? I'm a bird.
So thanks for sharing that, Todd. I know you were going to laugh when I asked you that question. So
Todd, I have to ask you a question, and it's probably a question that a lot of our viewers, would like to know. Also, some of our newbie Bigfoot people who are just getting into the subject. So can you just briefly tell us, Todd, how did you get into the Bigfoot world as far as becoming a researcher, becoming an archivist, being somebody that would be interviewing witnesses?
Well, like many children, I was fascinated with mysteries of our world. And in elementary school, I would always flock to the 00s at the school library. And I would see stuff about UFOs, the Bermuda Triangle, Loch Ness Monster. But Bigfoot just captivated me. There's something about a bipedal, hairy, upright creature lurking in the woods that's just so attractive and alluring. And I grew up on the edge of a forest. So to think that there could be something in that forest that I lived on the edge of really piqued my interest. And I just kept reading. One book led to another. And then I realized that there were reports in my province of Ontario. And I would go out and look in my neighborhood, basically, because I grew up in actually a village of 350 people, but there was
so
a
how
small...
old were you, Todd? I'm sorry. How old were you when you were like going out, in your story right now? How old were you? Like when you first started hearing about reports and wanting to go out?
Well, I read about the reports in the books when I was probably 8 or 9 or 10, because I know it was in elementary school, and I'm thinking grade 4, which would put me at probably 8 or 9 years of age. And then I actually started going out when I was 18. And I would just look in my area, but in hindsight, there was definitely no Sasquatch in that area. Not in the small tract of forest I was on the edge of, because it was just too small. But there were some sightings locally that I found out about later. But most of the sightings in Ontario were further north. And so I started doing field research at about age 18, 19. And then, of course, when I traveled with the band, I was 19, 20. And that's when I really got serious about field research, where I'd be going out for hours and following up on reports, trying to contact witnesses. But this is before the internet, so it wasn't easy to track down witnesses. It was literally asking at the club that I was playing at, hey, have you heard of so-and-so? They reported seeing something in 1977 in North Bay, Ontario. His name is Randy. Do you know him? And they'd look at you like you're nuts.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that is crazy.
All the time I get people saying, what are you smoking, buddy? There's no such thing. But for every 50 people you ask, there'd be one person who would say, you know what? My uncle saw something. He doesn't like to talk about it, but back in 82, he saw something that he can't describe, and he's a longtime hunter, and he swears it was like a gorilla in the woods. And that's when you go, wow, why would the guy make it up, and why would he withhold that information and only tell a select few people? If he wanted to draw attention to himself, he would be in the books that I was reading. He would be in magazines or newspapers. And that's the other thing. There was a lot of magazine coverage and TV shows at that time. So it was very easy for a young person to get involved in that, because it was just so attractive and just mysterious. And reading book after book after book led me to eventually just focusing on field research, because I wanted to try to solve the mystery, like most people. And
so
I didn't
I'm sorry, Todd. So but how did you get involved with some of the early researchers?
Who was the first one maybe that you connected with?
So the first researcher I connected with was Rene Dahinden. And Rene, for those who don't know, really got the Sasquatch bug in 1953. I think it was December 3rd when he heard something on the radio when he was in Calgary, or part of the farm who we were working at. He said, wouldn't that be something to go look for those things? Because he heard about the Abominable Snowman Yeti expeditions. And his boss basically said, oh, we have those in Canada. There's some in British Columbia. And that put a bug in Rene's head. And one of the first books I read was Rene's book with Don Hunter called Sasquatch, from I think 72, if I remember correctly. And so I thought, hey, why don't I try to find this guy, Rene? When I lived out in British Columbia in 1995, he was in the phone book. So I jotted down his number, and I didn't call him when I was there. I just didn't have the nerve. But when I was gearing up to go to Bella Coola, where I had the grouse mama bear incident where I was in the woods, I called him before I left to ask him for any advice he could offer. And so he was the first researcher I connected with, but I didn't keep connecting with him. Like, it was just a one-shot, one phone call. I was actually put off by him, to be honest with you. He was very gruff, jaded, quite bitter about the whole thing. So that was 1997. So he was pretty up there in age, had been through a lot.
Plus years into his looking for
this.
Yeah.
And so I didn't pursue that, but the next big researcher that I connected with would have been probably Chris Murphy or John Green. I can't remember which one I contacted first. I have a feeling it was Chris Murphy. He was, of course, writing great books. And I don't know how I got in touch with him, but I think someone emailed me and included him in an email saying we should connect, and we connected. And I'm pretty sure that he then connected me to John Green. And then everything just fell into place, because like Tim did, I had planned on writing a book about researchers. Tim actually did it. I thought of it and I did a lot of research, but I never followed through for various reasons. But I was in contact with hundreds of researchers because of that, including John Green. And I consider John Green to be probably my best connection for researchers, because he had so much information. And because of what he had, that's when I started that. There's a picture of John Green and myself. I started doing this sort of boxing stance with researchers just to be different, because I'm a huge boxing fan and mixed martial arts fan. So I thought, why don't we do a little pose? And John Green loved it. Here he is. I think he's probably 87 at the time. And he really, you can see it, he's really into it.
Yeah,
and Bob Gimlin is a huge boxing fan and MMA fan. So that's where it started. So I started doing these poses with the fighters. With the researchers. Sometimes they are fighters with the researchers. And so John really helped me to get in touch with people, and he invited me to go through his stuff. And when I went through all his stuff, I went, wow, there's a lot of stuff here that could be shared in some capacity. And that's what led me to the Sasquatch Archives, the YouTube channel, where I try to host from a non-biased perspective. Try to keep it open, although it's hard sometimes, and just say, here's what there is. And there's the Sasquatch Archives channel, and I started another channel called the Sasquatch Archives TV. So there's two channels on YouTube where you can access the information if you want to see it. There's no ads unless it's monetized by the copyright holder. So it's pretty easy to look at, and you won't be flooded with commercials and stuff.
So can you go through the difference between what's different between the two channels?
For sure. So initially I had just the one channel, and it hosted everything from documentaries to conference footage, interviews, old podcasts from the early 2000s, TV shows, news segments, you name it, it had it. Everything and anything Sasquatch, even old like records and music and things like that. So I had everything there, and someone said, you should separate it because it's hard to find stuff. And some people would say that they couldn't find everything because it wasn't organized by playlist. And I thought to myself, I should just create another channel and call it the Sasquatch Archives TV and host everything over there. You're always walking a fine line too when you are using other people's materials. So I thought, I don't want my channel to get shut down. So I thought if I have the copyrighted stuff, potential copyrighted stuff here, and then the stuff that I have permission to use here, then that stuff definitely, that channel won't get knocked down. So the Sasquatch Archive stuff has stuff that I have permission to use from the actual content creator. And the other channel has stuff that I couldn't get permission because the producer's gone. You can't track down people. So you're always walking a fine line with YouTube if you're not creating original content. So I had to be careful. So it's twofold. A, to separate stuff that's TV oriented or movie theater oriented, and then stuff that's conference oriented, interview oriented, and also just to make sure that it doesn't get knocked down. At least the stuff that's conferences, which in my opinion is the most important stuff. The TV shows, it's sensationalism. They're looking to sell to the audience and add spots. So it's not as true necessarily. There's a lot of embellishment and a lot of mistruths and facts. Facts aren't important when you're putting together a TV show. You want viewers and ad spots. So that's why I created the two channels, or at least created another channel to complement the Sasquatch Archives. So there's two channels.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
So, hey, Todd, going back to, researching and interviewing witnesses. So it's a two-part question. How many witnesses would you say that you've interviewed, and what have you learned from talking to them?
Good question. I would guess 100 would be a guess. And that doesn't seem like many, but I'm very choosy with who I contact who claims to have had a sighting. There are a lot of people who misidentify and can't really state with any certainty that they saw a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. They saw something, but there may be some confirmation bias, and they want to believe they saw a Sasquatch, but they really didn't see enough to make that conclusion, but they want to believe that they did for whatever reason. So I try to avoid those. I try to look at full-on sightings, unblocked, and it's clear what they saw. There's no confusion. There's no ambiguity. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a person. There's no doubt what they saw in their mind, okay? And they can describe it in detail. So I'm pretty choosy and fussy, and maybe that's not fair, but I just find that my time, like everyone's time, is precious. And I did initially have an open policy. I would contact anyone, but then I realized that there's some people who, to say it nicely, are seeing things, but those things aren't there. Call it delusion, call it mental health issues, whatever it may be, call it just wanting to see a Sasquatch so bad that seeing the shoulder of a bear is enough for them to believe that they saw a Sasquatch and to share that and boast about it. It almost seems like there's a club of, hey, I'm in the I saw a Bigfoot club. Right. And I see that with some individuals, and it's sad, but it's part and parcel with this research. So I've been selective. So I would say 100 solid witnesses who claim they saw a Sasquatch. And that's been over many years, because I get reports sent to me. I get a lot of photos sent to me. I get alleged track photos sent to me. And usually what I see is not related to Sasquatch. A lot of people, I wish everyone could take a tracking course for more than just a weekend. And also I wish everyone could spend months and months and years in the woods, not at once, but over time, so you can recognize the sounds that nature makes. You can recognize that acorns fall off of trees. They fall on your tent. They fall on your vehicle. Realize that that stick structure could be naturally formed, occurring. Realize that there are people in the woods who do things that make structures. Nature can twist saplings, can twist branches. It's not always Sasquatch, and maybe it's not even Sasquatch. Owls can make sounds that sound like primates. Foxes make very unusual sounds that people think are Sasquatch. Unless you see a Sasquatch mimicking a coyote, how can you say it was? So there's a lot of confirmation bias, unfortunately, and we have to deal with that. But so about 100 witnesses over the years, I would say.
And so if you can maybe narrow it down to maybe your 30 or 20 best, what was something that you feel like you learned from them? Or maybe what was something that you continually heard? What was the same kind of, because obviously these guys having this experience are going to be feeling the same thing or reacting the same way. So what can you say that you learned from that?
For sure, there are commonalities, but every sighting is different and every reaction to it seems to be different. That which is common that made me really give it credence was the fact that they didn't want to tell anyone about it. They really they didn't want me to advertise it, to publish it. They just wanted someone to hear what happened to them. And when I met with them in person, sometimes they were shaking. They got emotional. And that's not always an indication that they're telling the truth. But the way they were able to describe it, and a lot of times it was more than just one witness. So when you have multiple witnesses, sometimes as many as 5, I interviewed separately, all saying the same thing. And to me, it didn't seem rehearsed, but people can lie. But to get 5 people together to lie about that with no financial gain, they don't want it to be out in cyberspace, really makes you go, maybe there is something to this. So I think sincerity, the emotions involved, and just, kind of like your spidey sense. Everyone has an ability to read people. There are some really good liars in the world. There are the Ted Bundys of the world who will lie through their teeth, look you in the eye. So we do have that to contend with. But having multiple witnesses stretched across miles and miles, unrelated multiple witnesses, describing the same thing over months of time or years really does, to me, give it credence and makes me wonder what is going on here. How
And what
could
is
these
something that these, I'm sorry, Todd, what is something that these people have in common? Like they're outdoorsy people, like
not necessarily, because sometimes it's a road crossing. There's people who, of course, if it's a hunter, an outdoorsman, an avid hiker, and they tell me, listen, I've hunted for 30 years and I know what I saw, my ears are going to go, okay, something definitely happened there, unless you're lying through your teeth. But there's many times where it's someone who didn't believe in Sasquatch, did not give Sasquatch an iota of a chance of existing, yet they saw something cross in front of them that they could only describe as looking like a Bigfoot, as they've seen on the Patterson film, or as described like a gorilla, a man-like creature covered in hair. And when you convert a skeptic to a believer, that's powerful. That's really powerful, because that didn't fit into their box, but now it's in their box and they don't know how to deal with it. Those are the ones that make me go, wow, that's incredible. And, there have been a few people I've interviewed who were experts in their field of observation. And one in particular, I spoke about it before with others, is an ornithologist, a bird expert, who is widely known in Canada and world renowned. Her and her husband saw what they alleged to be a Sasquatch behind their cabin, a very remote log cabin from the 1800s. And she said, without question, I know what I saw. I get paid and make a living at observing very acute details. And she described it. And she described it as if it was a Sasquatch. And she had no reason to believe that Sasquatch existed. She wasn't in the field of study. She told me flat out that I just thought it was a myth. I'd heard about it, of course, but I couldn't believe it. There it was in my backyard. And I know what I saw. I saw the muscles moving. I saw the hair. And she was making notes, mental notes, because that's her bread and butter. So that's pretty powerful when that happens.
Powerful.
that is
definitely.
powerful.
So how about you, Todd? What's the most compelling thing that's happened to you while you've been out there?
Well, I cannot conclusively say that I've seen a Sasquatch. I could say that maybe I did, but I didn't see enough of whatever I saw, which was basically a tuft of hair that appeared to be quite high in the air, and it moved very quickly. But I don't know that it was a Sasquatch. May have been, may not have been, could have been a bear. Do I think it was a Sasquatch? Quite possibly. Do I think it was a bear? Possibly. Aside from that, for me, it's been situations. And what I mean by that is, and I'm going to only talk about the ones when I'm with someone else, because the ones I'm by myself, people might question that, but with other people having the same experience, it gives it a lot more credence, I would say. So with someone who I trust with my life, we were out in Pennsylvania in the Allegheny Forest, close to where the Jacobs site was. For those who don't know, the Jacobs creature, which many people just feel is a bear, and I'm probably agreeing with that. But anyways, we were researching that area because there's been a lot of reports, and we're down in a gully, and there's some high ground around us. And he goes over to take a leak, and all of a sudden, a rock comes flying through the trees, and you can hear it sailing through the branches and leaves, and you hear it plump hit the ground. Fair size. We never found the rock. I've got a thermal imager, and I'm looking all through the forest. I don't see a thing, but realize there's high ground. Thermal's limited. And he said, "What the hell was that?" I said, "It sounded like a rock to me." Now, this area, you might say, well, maybe someone was back there. Okay, it's 3 a.m. I've got a thermal imager. You can hear when people arrive in this area because it's a dirt road that goes way back, and you can hear any time a truck or a car pulls down that. They're kicking up gravel, dirt. Mm-hmm. Anyways, we didn't hear anything. Could it have been a person? It could have been, but they would had to have seen us in the dark at 3 a.m. and know we were down there and throw a rock at us, not knowing if we're packing guns, not knowing that I have a thermal imager and we could find them potentially. So that happened 2 nights in a row in the same location at different times. One was 3 a.m. The other time was just after midnight. My friend had went again to take a leak, and I went the other way to take a leak. And again, a rock came flying through. And again, we heard the thud. And it wasn't an acorn dropping straight down vertically. It was definitely sailing through the leaves and making a lot of noise as it hit the branches and the leaves. So that's only part of the story, because the next day after the second rock throwing, we thought, we got to look at this area. We got to go up in the hill. So we went up in the hill, and we really looked through the area. We found a lot of deer sign droppings, deer rubs where they were bedding down. And we thought, okay, well, I guess it makes sense. If there was a Sasquatch, there's lots of food here. And we were about to leave, and the person I was with, and I was with another person as well. There was 3 of us at this time, 2 of us when the rock throwing incidents occurred, but 3 of us doing the investigation to see what was going on up there, see if we could find footprints of anything, any sign of anything. And we were about to leave, and my one research buddy, who's an avid hunter and a very smart man, very smart, very bush savvy, let's say. I'm fairly bush savvy, but he's on another level. He goes, wait, something's not right here. And he looked, and there was, and I can't remember what tree it was. If he listens to this, he'll laugh and say, oh, Todd, it was this tree. Anyways, it's basically a favorite food of deer, the buds. And the tree, I think it was like a younger sapling had been clearly jammed in between 2 other trees. It hadn't fallen. It was jammed in there. And it still had the buds on it, so it was fairly fresh. And it looked like it had been broken at the base. We couldn't find where the stump was for this tree, and we did a grid search trying to look for this. So it seemed like something must have carried it. We couldn't see any drag marks. Something had to carry this thing and shove it in there. And then there were, I believe it was red oak branches put on top where there was less foliage of this sapling that was laying like this in between the trees, as if creating a blind, like a deer blind. Now, hunters will do that. Now, the sapling, it was fairly big. We did try to move it, and it took the 3 of us to move it. What's interesting is it looked right at where the deer bedding area was. And interestingly, too, that red oak, if I'm not mistaken, the red oak branch, we couldn't find any oak trees in that area. And we were looking hard to find a red oak tree. So it seemed like something had put that there from another area. And as you know, deer love oak as well, or acorns. So it seemed like something or someone set this up to attract the deer. And this just happened to be where that rock had come from, that general direction, 2 nights in a row. And then the next morning was raining, and we stayed in our tents because it was not a good day. And then we had sort of a common area for cooking. And I cooked up something and went to have a nap because there was nothing going on. It was raining. And then my buddy cooked up something, and he took a nap in his tent. We were about 30, 40 feet away from each other in our tents. And it was raining. It was raining hard. And he came into the common area later on after I woke up and said, there's like a boulder on top of my tarp. He had a tarp over his tent. He said, I'm not sure how it got there, but it's a boulder on top of my tent. And he heard it fall. But he thought, well, did it fall from a tree, a boulder? It was a fist size.
Was it on the roof of his tent? Or
yeah, so he had a tarp. He had a tarp over top of his tent because the tent wasn't completely waterproof. It was raining hard. So he had a tarp over top of the tent, stretched out, just to give him more
So it was
more protection.
So it was taut. So the boulder, did it make it go down? Or?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
He heard it, and he thought it was a stick. But when he woke up to go cook something, he looked, and it was a fist-sized rock. He still has the rock. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So I thought, and again, I trust this guy with my life, and I've done a lot of research with him. And if he's pranking me, I don't see why, because he could have pranked me so many times over the years. And this was the only time where I went, is he pranking me? And I thought, well, he never has before. And I've been out in the woods with him, and so I trust him. And again, we had rocks thrown at us 2 nights in a row. We saw that unusual deer blind, and then this happened in the daytime. And a lot of people said, well, Sasquatch never come out in the rain. Well, maybe they did that night or that day. We don't know. I don't know what it was. Is it possible there was a rock up there? Yes, it is. Could the wind have knocked it down? That's possible. Highly unlikely, though. But it's possible.
That is a crazy story.
That is interesting for sure.
So those were things that made me go, so what's going on? And there was another time in British Columbia where I was with 3 other people, and there's a lot of controversy about Eyeshine, or what I call Eyeglow, but we saw what we can only describe as Eyeglow. There's no doubt about it. But what was behind those eyes, I don't know. Was it an owl? I doubt it, because it was moving as if it was walking, and there was more than just one set of eyes, and they changed color. I kid you not. They changed color they started off as white, and I thought it was just some people with headlamps, but they weren't giving off that typical headlamp hue.
Mm-hmm.
And then they changed from white to yellow to amber to orange, and then back again. It was freaky.
That is freaky.
There were 2 other people with me, but again, I don't know what it was. But a lot of people talk about Eyeshine or Eyeglow, and it doesn't make sense from a scientific standpoint, because it's like your ears don't give off sound.
Right.
They collect sound, right? Your eyes don't give off light. They receive light. But something out there seems to be able to control Eyeglow. And I can't describe it other than it looked like eyes glowing.
And you can tell it was a pair. They were in pairs.
Exactly. And one of them blinked. Like there were one, you could see it literally blink. It only lasted for maybe 30 seconds, and we all saw it, and we couldn't believe it. And this is before I'd ever heard of Eyeshine or Eyeglow. So I didn't have it in my mind already. Oh, that's Eyeglow. I had to ask someone, what the heck was that?
So here's a question, Todd. So I know like you have a lot of experience with in this world of Bigfoot, but I mean, aren't there some animals that are there? I'm imagining that the better your night vision, that your eyes would collect light.
Yes.
And that's what creates eye shine. So do you think that maybe there's a possibility that Sasquatches have just such amazing night vision that their eyes may appear as glowing?
Possibly. And why I don't like to call it eye shine is because we all see deer in the headlights. We all see the cat's eyes reflecting light. But this was different. This was not eye shine. This was clearly something that was controlled, because it changed colors, and it was clearly changing colors and intensity as well. I can't tell you how many deer I've seen on the side of the road, coyotes, and then cats in my neighborhood, including my own cat. And when I turn on the back porch light, I can see its eyes. Sometimes they're green, sometimes they're bluish. This was literally like the intensity of the light. It was crazy, the intensity. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And again, I'd never heard of Bigfoot with Eyeshine. And interestingly, way back in the day, like in the early 1900s, there were some articles referencing what they didn't call Sasquatch, because the word Sasquatch or Bigfoot wasn't created. But, the mountain devils or the hairy men of the forest, they talk about Eyeshine. They say glowing eyes of ember is what they called it. Glowing eyes of ember. But they never talked about the deer or the mountain lions or the bears who have great night vision as having glowing embers for eyes. But Sasquatch, they did. So there seems to be a distinction or a difference between the level, and maybe it's because they have better eye shine. I don't know. But it just does not make sense that if they're doing it, that they're sending out light, because your eyes, how would you see? It was just so strange. Yeah, it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense that they're doing it if they are. That's the problem. That's the crux.
So, and were you all shining light at him?
No, this is the thing.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, we had no light on us, and it was a dark night. Of course, there's always ambient light. Always. Even if the moon is behind the clouds, there's always ambient light, but it was dark. And it's in the redwood forest, and it's huge trees. So stars, everything's blocked out. Like, you are surrounded by trees. All you see are tops of trees. You can barely see the sky. So I thought all these things too, because it didn't make sense to me as someone who had never heard of it before. I'm trying to figure out, what did I just see? And it was actually, funny enough, it was Matthew Moneymaker, love him or hate him, he actually was on this expedition, and he came barreling down the road in his Hummer. He was renting a Hummer at the time. And I'm like, oh, Matt, come on, you're scaring everything away. And he comes flying down this road. He's known as a crazy driver. Comes flying down this road, and he just stops and says, so how are things going, guys? You hearing anything, see anything? And we're like, dude, I don't know what happening. Is someone out there with headlamps walking in the forest right now? He's like, no, everyone's settled in their tents. I've been checking on everyone. I go, well, I'm going to tell you what I just saw. And that's when he said, listen, and he rolled down his window a little bit more, and he whispered, I don't tell people this, but these things can make their eyes shine. He says, you just saw a Sasquatch's eye shine. Now, I'm thinking, could Matt have been back in that forest? There's no way. This was in an area called Seashell, British Columbia. It is terrain like this, up and down. Anything walking back there at nighttime without a light, it's suicide. Because you are going to trip over deadfall. You're going to just miss your step. You're going to break an ankle.
Right.
And Matt was there almost like within, he probably scared these things away, whatever it was. And again, I don't know what it was, because you could hear his Hummer coming down the road, barreling down the road. And I thought, who's this idiot that's driving like a maniac down this old forest road up this mountain? And it's Matt Moneymaker just flying down the road. And he literally screeches his brakes and skids up to where we're standing on the road. So it could not have been him. And if it was a person, wow, amazing how you did that without falling and killing yourself. And how did you make it do that? Anyways, it remains a mystery. I'm not saying that it was a Sasquatch. I'm just saying that I don't know what it was. And I can see how people are relating it because there's a history of it. Sasquatch with this eyeglow, or burning coals of ember.
So speaking of history, what inspired you? Now you kind of just it sparked my interest there. What led you into really archiving history and just being fascinated with the history of the subject?
So, I started writing the book about Bigfoot researchers, and I just started researching who's who. And I collected over the years about 1,300 names. But of course, there's the core group of researchers like the Rene Dahindens, the John Greens, the Peter Burns, the Grover Krantzes, people, the Four Horsemen, and others like Bob Titmus, and then later on Thomas Steenberg, and so many others, that it led me to John Green's collection. So I wasn't really archiving anything other than collecting some books and magazine articles, but not that many, just the essentials. And then after connecting with John Green, he basically said, listen, I can't keep answering your questions, because I was emailing him and calling him. He said, you need to come to my house and do the research yourself. I can't keep going into my filing cabinet and pulling out, and I understood. I was harassing him basically. So he invited me to his place, and I went to his place. The plan was just to make notes, and I had no idea what kind of collection he had. I knew he had a lot, but oh my God, when I saw it, he's like, okay, here's the A section, here's the B section, here's the C section. And there was just so much stuff. And that was just the letters and communication. Because remember, before the internet, it was all handwritten letters and telegrams. So not until, I guess, the late 90s did he start emailing. And he would even print off the emails. So he kept a copy of the letter he sent to someone, and he kept a copy of the letter he received. Because he was a journalist and a newspaper man, he had the ability to make a copy of his own letter, which is fantastic because you got both sides of the story. Often in collections, you just see what you received. Okay, you don't see what the person wrote.
And all those could have been lost too,
Yeah, exactly. So that's when I realized that he has so much stuff, and he was always open to letting people go through it. But I said, John, before I left, and I was there for, I think, 4 or 5 days the first time, and I only scratched the surface. And I was going through his files nonstop, and I was only scratching the surface. And I said, John, we need to archive this stuff digitally. I had a scanner. I didn't have it with me, but I said, we need to start scanning this stuff. And he did not see the value. He said, listen, I don't think anyone's going to be interested. It's useless information. And I was shocked that he felt that way. But I guess after doing it for 60 plus years, he was frustrated himself and hadn't gotten anywhere with, categorizing these animals scientifically. So he much like Rene Dahinden, he was probably a bit jaded. Rene was really jaded, but John Green probably wanted to just give up. But eventually, because he invited me back, because I said, listen, I didn't ask to come back. I just said, John, I was able to get through some stuff, but there's so much stuff. And he said, then come back. Like, it's that simple. Then go home and come back, right? And so I did that. I literally went home for 2 weeks, bought a scanner so that I could take to BC, and started thinking, how am I going to do this? Because there's so much stuff I need to prioritize. And I went back and I was on a mission. And so that really led me to collecting stuff. It started with John Green, which then led me to Chris Murphy, passing over his collection, not the museum collection, but his personal collection of stuff. And Chris Murphy had John Furman's collection. A lot of people don't know John Furman. There's Christopher Murphy. If you don't know Christopher Murphy, you got to do your research, because Christopher Murphy has written some wonderful books, and probably the best all-around book about Sasquatch called Know the Sasquatch. If you don't have that book, add it to your collection. And the precursor to that book was Meet the Sasquatch. And there's an interesting story about why it became Know the Sasquatch, but that's for another time. If Tim or Dana want me back, I can share that story, because it's a funny one, including literally John Green throwing a book at Chris Murphy's head.
Oh my gosh.
That sounds like a great story.
Yeah, it's a great story. But so Chris Murphy, he connected me with people too, so I have to give thanks to him. But it started with John Green, and through that, there were some other people whose collection was passed on to me. Some people didn't want it public that they gave me their collection for various reasons. So there's collections that I have that I can't even talk about, because they asked that I don't, again, for various reasons. Sometimes there's book collections that I've either purchased or have been donated. And, some of those books are signed to the person, so they don't want the authors to know that they gave away that, because, of the value that it may hold. But they're at that point where they just want to downsize. So I welcome anyone to share anything. And there's been so many people that have shared stuff, and I'm thankful for that. As I say, I'm just a vessel. I have my own collection and own stuff that I've done, including a conference I had forgotten I spoke at, not a conference, a university I spoke at in 2005, and I videotaped it in Canada, probably the first lecture in a university. And I thought, well, yeah, I forgot about that. I found it on an old CD or DVD, and I had trouble getting the information, because it wasn't playing. So I had to really, the quality's not good, but someday I'll post that. But anyhow, that's basically how it started, was through John Green, and me realizing, oh my God, this guy's got letters starting from 1956 right up until, I think his last letter was probably 2014 that he actually hand wrote. And I'm thinking, wow. And the rest of it were emails, and he would file it all away. Not every single email, but he would print off the most important ones. But letters upon letters upon letters. It literally took me, I think I was at John Green's place for 16 days in total, if I'm not mistaken. Not consecutively, but over three different times there. And I would spend 12 hours a day scanning stuff nonstop. And it was literally grab a file, say the Peter Byrne file, and open it up and just throw the first page on the scanner, get the next page ready, get that one off there, throw the next one. It was just continuous. That scanner got a workout. Then, aside from the letters, there were photos, including negatives, including slides, and then old cassette interviews. I wasn't prepared for cassette interviews.
Right.
Who has a cassette player? I had to go buy there you go. I had to go buy a cassette player. Now I had to find blank tapes.
Oh, that would be really hard.
Well, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Well, you could go online. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm in Agassiz, British Columbia, where John Green's living, and I can't get something to me in the next couple of days. I need those blank cassettes now. So I'm thinking, well, it's a long shot, but I'll go down to the local convenience store. Don't they have a box of Maxell blank tapes? And I thought, someone's looking out for me. This was meant to happen. So I recorded all his interviews that he had collected over the years. Some of them were Roger Patterson's interviews.
Wow.
because they did swaps back then.
Right.
So it was just nonstop. And I ended up, I can't remember how many files I had. It was in the tens of thousands. Letters alone were in the thousands.
That sounds like an incredible amount of work and dedication.
So that's the start, Dana. Now I've got to read.
But now it's all, is that all on your Sasquatch?
No.
Archives?
No. So what I put on the archives is the stuff that people would be most interested in.
Right.
The fanatics like myself are interested in those letters, and those letters in a YouTube format, it doesn't really work that well. I put a few up there, and you'll see they only get like 200 views. So there's 200 of us in the world that care about those, but that's not really getting the word out there. The people want to see, they actually want to see the sensationalistic stuff. They want to see, Rene Dahinden trashing Grover Krantz at a conference in 1996. They want to see that stuff. They want to see that gritty stuff, that makes you think and creates controversy. They want to see, Snell Grove Lake where the rocks were thrown at the cabin. They want that stuff. But there's a select few of us that want the letters to see that information. But I had to read all those letters because what value are those letters without cataloging them? And I indexed them all. I summarized each one because remember, I was writing a book about researchers. So I had to catalog everything, index it all so I could find stuff. So I probably have the largest indexed Sasquatch collection. There's literally thousands of entries. I know that David Paulides.
Nice to know.
Yeah, it's indexed.
I mean, because like a lot of people would come to you and ask you,
it's because
things, especially other researchers, which is really important.
It's become a job, actually. As much as I want to share stuff, I'm constantly asked to look up this and look up that. It's become like a second job.
Right.
So, hey, Todd, leading from that, going into how can like our viewers, how can other researchers follow you or get in touch with you? Like, because, yeah.
So there's the YouTube channel. Well, there's two of them now. The Sasquatch Archives. Anyone can reach out on there. So either the Sasquatch Archives or the Sasquatch Archives TV is a way to just ask general questions because I can see it. And other people can see the answer too. Because I think that's important as well. Not only to, it's one thing to reach out. If I reach out to Cliff Barrickman and say, hey, Cliff, can you tell me about this footprint? I'll get the answer, but someone else may also ask him the same question a year later. So it's nice to have the questions asked in a public area, so to speak, YouTube being public, and people can see the answers. The problem is finding that answer. That's the problem when you've got 200 comments. But anyone is welcome to contact me through Facebook, Todd Prescott. Look for the Sasquatch Archives icon, or you can through YouTube. I don't like to give out my personal email because I've had a few crazy people contact me, including a stalker guy. So I prefer not to do that because there's some weird stuff that goes on in Sasquatch research right back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, and still going on today. Unfortunately, like UFO studies, it attracts an interesting crowd and not always a stable crowd. So I'm not going to.
That's in any subject. In any subject, religion, political belief. There's crazies everywhere.
So I guess before we start wrapping things up, because I can't believe it's been an hour.
I know it's actually
So what are your plans with what you're doing next?
So I'm actually overwhelmed with material, and I had to take a break because I was doing some home renovations, and I also wanted time to start up the new channel because I had to move everything from the channel to the new channel, and that may seem easy, but I had to create a new intro, and I have to, change all the links that I put up on Facebook on all the different groups, so it's not a dead link anymore. So I'm sharing the information on Facebook, it's on YouTube, it's on Reddit, but you can't see, but over here on my right, I've got a huge box full of VHS tapes that need to be converted to digital. And that's a huge undertaking because, you've got to play it in real time. And then the audio doesn't sync up. For some reason, when you digitalize it, at least with my software, it doesn't sync up properly. So you have to try to figure out, you have to move the audio over. You have to separate the tracks, the audio from the video. You have to separate the tracks. I have to run it through Audacity to get the levels down. Sometimes there's stuff I have to manually bring down the levels, and then I have to sync it back up and hope that I got it right when I render the video. Rendering the video takes as long as the video. So if it's an hour video, it's going to take an hour to render, if not more. Put it up on YouTube, hope that everything's good. So there's a lot to do. And then that's just one box I have. And this is mostly from Larry Lund. Larry Lund has been a blessing. Yeah. And thank God for Larry Lund. He has saved so much stuff, and he's been gracious to share it with me. And I'm putting it on YouTube. So right now it's not really John Green stuff. It's the vast majority is Larry Lund stuff. John Green wasn't, as much as he had a lot of stuff, he wasn't a collector. He didn't videotape conferences. He kept letters, photos, and cassette interviews. He wasn't interested in conferences. He didn't really enjoy them that much. So I've got thousands of hours of conference footage. I've got a huge box, you can't see my hands, but huge box full of just the Western Bigfoot Society get-togethers. There's probably 100 of those alone, VHS tapes, and those are 2.5 hours long.
You need an intern, Todd.
Or hey, maybe, that's a great idea. Maybe we could get an intern to contact Todd to help them. If anybody out there,
it would be, but it creates more work for me because I'm a micromanager. Right. I am a micromanager, and everything has to be perfect. It has to be my way. But
you definitely got a lot going on for sure, Todd.
There's a lot going on. Crazy.
Yeah. But it's so vital.
Yeah. And I just started following you on the Sasquatch Archives. So
thanks.
Yay, you got another subscriber.
Todd, I can't believe again. This went so fast.
It did go so fast, Todd. It was awesome having you on and hearing all about you. And we're definitely going to have him back. And
I appreciate you. You're just, you become, I hope you feel the same way. You become a friend. So I appreciate that. And,
absolutely. And I appreciate what you two are doing, because this is part of the process too. And your book is, if you don't have Tim's book, please get that book, The Bigfoot Influencers. Amazing book. And I know there'll be another one or two coming at some point when he takes a break from all the work. But I'm thankful for you guys. I appreciate you having me on. It's ultimately my pleasure.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all ours. Thank you so much, Todd.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
That was a great show.
Oh my gosh. He just, it's so much work. I mean,
all I have to say is thank God for people like Todd, because who would do all that?
There's a few.
There's a few.
Not many,
I know,
but they're all doing different things.
It's so important to retain all that information and have it cataloged away. Because, one day when we have that live one or that dead one, people are going to look back and look into all of what it led up to. And so it's super important to have that.
I think sometimes people just don't realize how important and critical what Todd's doing and others, and how much time it takes. I mean, gosh, it's crazy.
That's dedication.
And you guys, we appreciate you, and hopefully that's why we do this. We want to bring people here that are, we want to share what they're doing. Yep. And it's we're not that she is, but me, I'm not that important, or I don't say important, but I'm not that interesting. Maybe I'll say I'm
not interesting. Well, but not maybe not. We're not Bigfoot researchers, but what we like to do is introduce you to the world of researchers, because there's a lot of them.
And there's a lot of them that you don't know, or some people don't remember, or the new people in the subject don't know who they are. So it's
but they all have the same mission.
But we thank you guys.
Thanks guys for being here tonight.
We had such a great time with Todd, and we look forward to seeing you guys next episode.
We'll see you the next one. See ya.